Have a look at this. It's the brand new MSI Stealth 14 Studio, and it's one of a new wave, a new generation of laptops. 14-inch RTX 40 series, 13th gen Intel processors, really nice, thin and light, content creator workstations and also gaming laptops. And I love the fact that really there isn't any compromise going with a smaller 14-inch form factor these days. This thing packs a punch. So a big thank you to MSI for sending this out for me to have a play with and also partnering with me on this video. And having played with it for a couple of weeks now, I have some thoughts. Let me give you the quick overview first. 14-inch QHD plus 240Hz IPS display, 16:10, which is always good to see. Chassis, 1.7 kilograms, which isn't the lightest 14-inch laptop you've ever used, but it's not bad at all given the beefy cooling in here. And also an RTX 4050. Now this can be spec'd with up to a 4070, but you may be thinking, Tom, I don't want a 4050 in this, that's not very powerful. Well, I think you'd be wrong, because it's not just about the series name. Crucially, you have to look at the TGP, the power, the wattage of the card. And this is a 90-watt TGP 4050, which is not too shabby. We'll come to some benchmarks in a minute. We've also got a 45-watt 13th gen H series processor from Intel, of course. 16 gigs of RAM, 512 storage. Up top, we have their webcam, as well as this little handy privacy shutter, and also an IR webcam, so you can use face unlocking. Now, this is the Star Blue chassis color. It also comes in a pure white, which I imagine is a little bit less stealthy. You definitely noticed that. But I think it's a pretty smart looking laptop, although there are some gaming flourishes. We've got a per key RGB keyboard, a little bit of RGB going on at the back here underneath. I quite like the look of that. And also a pretty good sized trackpad. It feels good. There's maybe a little bit more room it could have expanded into, but not too bad at all. No room for a numpad, but I think overall it's a really nicely built gaming and workstation laptop. And there isn't really any major compromise like we've seen previously with smaller designs. We get top-notch graphics and performance. We'll come to some benchmarks in a second. As I say, they've managed to improve the cooling as well. They've got a huge vapor chamber cooler in here, which actually covers half of the board, as well as a couple of fans. So we're really getting the best out of the hardware that they've put in here. The only downside is the price. This 4050 model will cost you about £2,000, which is an awful lot of money, but compared to the Galaxy Book 3 Ultra, which I recently reviewed, that actually costs about $500 more than this for the 4050, and you can get that with a 4070 as well, but only with a 60-watt TGP. And this is going to be really important. The 90-watt total graphics power, the high wattage of this card, I think is actually really important. A lot of people seem to forget about that and just look at the series. This actually performs really well, whether you're gaming, whether you're doing some editing in Premiere Pro or Blendering. So great screen, color accurate, solid performance, decent battery life, assuming you're not playing games, and all in a very nice thin and light chassis that weighs just 1.7 kilograms. And if you do enjoy the video, a cheeky like and subscribe would be amazing. Of course, a bit noisy, isn't it? If you can hear me over that fan noise, rounding out the specs, we have up to 64 gigs of RAM, DDR5, although I've only got 16 in here. I think the sweet spot will be 32, especially if you're going to use this for your content creation. Also a 1TB PCIe 4 SSD, a 72-watt-hour battery. We also get a MUX switch, which is actually very important, and it also supports Wi-Fi 6E. There you go. After like 20 seconds of lifting it up, the fans do calm down, so clearly it just doesn't like being on a flat surface. Perhaps use it on a laptop stand or with a cooling base. But particularly with this 14-inch form factor, MSI is really trying to balance the performance and the portability. And of course, with the new RTX 40 series cards, we get all the power efficiency benefits of that new Ada architecture and DLSS 3, which is magic. I say that every video I mention DLSS, particularly DLSS 3, which also now adds frame generation. Only a handful of games do support it, but where they do, particularly the likes of Flight Simulator, it makes a world of difference. Also, as I mentioned, this is the 90-watt TGP of the 4050, which is definitely on the higher end of the wattage for that card, and in some games and applications, that will be faster than a lower wattage 4060 or even a 4070. So this is a pretty beefy card. Plus there's fast AV1 video codecs for better quality streams and faster video exports, as well as NVIDIA's own broadcast suite and super resolution for AI video upscaling. There's lots of nice to have bonus features beyond just the pure performance of the card. It's not going to match the 125-watt RTX 4090 in the ROG Zephyrus G14, which is also a 14-inch powerhouse, but that does actually have a slower refresh rate and it's almost twice the price. The Stealth 14 Studio also now gets a mux switch, so you can choose between using the integrated or dedicated GPU depending on your needs, or just leave it in the auto-switching hybrid mode. I love how sharp and smooth this QHD Plus 240Hz screen is, but the trouble is I could rarely take full advantage of that refresh rate, even at 1080p with this 4050. But still, any game hitting triple digits is a great experience on this and feels kind of uncanny on a laptop this small. No, it's not OLED, and at around 400 nits it's not all that bright, and also there's no HDR to speak of, which is a little bit disappointing, but the IPS level panel is pretty good, and it's surprisingly color accurate, especially in MSI's True Color P3 preset, although I did notice the viewing angles aren't the best on this. However, if you do prefer a bigger screen, MSI are also launching a 15, 16 and 17-inch version of the Stealth, with the latter two also being part of their Studio family. And as you would expect, come with NVIDIA's Studio certification, so this can be a proper gaming laptop and also a productivity workstation. So this guy measures just 19mm thick. Also, we have dual 2-watt dyno audio speakers on the keyboard deck and a couple of subwoofers out the side. And the speakers are pretty good actually. We were playing some videos and movies earlier. Solid bass, they get pretty loud. Not too bad at all. As for ports, we have a pretty good range, including a USB 3.2 Type-C, which also supports DisplayPort and power delivery, so you can charge it that way if you want, but the fastest charging, you'll want to use the bundle charger in this guy. We also have one Thunderbolt 4 and an audio combo jack and an HDMI 2.1, because given the screen size, you might want to output to a bigger screen. My only gripe is that as a gaming laptop, you might have wanted an Ethernet port, so you could have, well, not rely on Wi-Fi, and also for creators, the lack of an SD card slot is a bit disappointing. Popping the base off, we can see the large vapor chamber and a couple of fans, along with the RAM and the SSD, although as you can see, there's no second M2 slot for an extra SSD. The precision touchpad is nice to use with a responsive feeling click, and I do quite like this contrasting lighter shade of blue. The keyboard's decent as well, although I'm not crazy about this font, but it's well designed and easy to type on despite a slightly soft feel, but we do get perky RGB. Okay, enough waffling, let's talk about performance. Well, as you would expect with these specs, it was smooth sailing with everyday tasks, all benefiting from that buttery smooth 240Hz refresh. It's not just gamers who appreciate a high refresh. I even edited parts of this video on here no problem, although if I'm honest, longer or more complex 4K projects would definitely benefit from 32 gigs of RAM. But as you heard earlier, whenever you're doing anything moderately intensive, those fans do whir up and it gets loud, too loud if I'm honest. But what about gaming? That's pretty important, right? Well, my takeaway would be drop the resolution to Full HD. With this spec, the Quad HD native resolution is quite demanding and you're not really going to take advantage of that full 240Hz refresh rate. So I've tested a bunch of games at both resolutions, but I would encourage you, if you do pick one of these up, to play at Full HD, unless you're gaming with older titles or you're happy to drop a few settings. In Fortnite, with medium-high settings and DLSS in DX12 mode, I averaged around 100 FPS at 1080 and around 76 FPS at 1440. In Cyberpunk, with ultra settings, ray tracing and DLSS with frame gen on, at 1080p I averaged 69 FPS, although that dropped to 50 when I bumped up the resolution to Quad HD. Jumping into a bit of Forza Horizon 5, and impressively, at 1440p, even without DLSS, I was getting 130 FPS, which then jumped up to 153 with DLSS and frame gen enabled. I also tested F122 and actually achieved some pretty impressive frame rates. And finally, my old favourite, Rainbow Six Siege, and I was comfortably getting 240 FPS at ultra settings at 1080p, and actually the same at 1440 if I drop the settings down to high. Interestingly though, when I unplug the laptop but have the mux switch still set to discrete graphics mode, the performance dropped by around 30 to 40%, which is significant, but most games were still very playable even on battery. In terms of battery life, it's not actually too bad. In my YouTube playback test, with the brightness set to 50% or about 200 nits on this guy, I got around 5 hours, and with everyday general non-gaming use, I think 5 to 6 hours is actually pretty doable, so you could just about get through a full work day with this guy if you wanted to, but it does all depend how you use it. As for the webcam, not too bad. It is 720p, so the quality is not the best, but we do get face unlocking with Windows Hello support, so not too bad, but perhaps could be better. 1080p would have been nice. If you do fancy checking this out for yourself, I'll leave links in the description below. And if you've got any questions, let me know in the comments. This is the MSI Stealth 14 Studio. I'm Tom the Tech Chap, and if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe right down below would be lovely, and I'll see you next time. I was going to go for a chef's kiss there, but I'm not sure you can really apply that to an upscaling technology. That's me, delightfully awkward.